The courthouse steps of Pine Ridge creaked under the shuffle of worn boots and colder hearts. Snow fell again, fine and lazy, carried sideways by a high country wind that found every gap in a man's coat. Inside, under the fluorescent lights of the county annex, the air smelled of burnt coffee and wet wool. Noah Wyatt sat near the back collar, up jaw tight. He looked like he did not belong there, which was true. A Marine for nearly 15 years, Pine Ridge's courthouse felt like another kind of battlefield, the kind fought with whispers and sideways glances. His hands were folded around a folded envelope, the last of his savings. On the floor beside him lay Sergeant the German Shepherd, who'd once worn a service vest half covered in sand. Now the dog was lean graying at the muzzle and missing one eye. The other eye, sharp amber, scanned the room as if still on patrol. The pair drew quiet stares, some curious others mocking. The auctioneer tapped the microphone. Next item, parcel number 1437, Old Stone Residence, Bear Ridge Road. His voice carried that dry, practiced rhythm. Starting bid 50 cents. A wave of chuckles rolled through the crowd. Someone muttered, cheaper than a burger. Noah looked up at the screen. The photo showed a mansion built from rough-cut granite windows, boarded porch sagging a ruin forgotten by the world. But something about the picture, its lonely dignity, held him. "Any takers?" the auctioneer asked. Silence. A cough from the back. Noah's hand rose. It wasn't a heroic gesture, more like instinct, like the way he'd raised it once to volunteer for something no one else wanted. 50 cents, the auctioneer repeated, half disbelieving. Do I hear anyone else? More laughter. Give him a medal, someone called. From the front row, a man in an expensive suit turned. Charles Harrington, mayor of Pine Ridge for the last 20 years, just like his father before him. His eyes narrowed slightly at Noah, recognition flickering, then dismissal. The gavel hit wood. Sold. A ripple of murmurs followed, the kind that carried judgment wrapped in amusement. Noah felt the heat rise behind his ears. He gathered his papers and stood. The clerk behind the counter looked at him with something between pity and suspicion. That'll be 50 cents plus processing fees. $312.50 total. Noah slid the envelope forward. Make it quick before I change my mind. She stapled receipts, then pressed a small brass key against a manila folder. You can still walk away, Mr. Wyatt. That place is bad luck. Noah managed a thin smile. Luck's overrated. She hesitated, then reached into her drawer and placed a tarnished coin on top of the folder. Then take this for luck anyway. Found it cleaning out my father's desk. $50, 1943. Her voice dropped to a whisper. That house has history, Mr. Wyatt. Bad history. He looked at the coin, at the year stamped deep into the silver. Wartime metal. He nodded once. Thank you. When he stepped outside, the air was brittle. The snow had stopped, leaving the streets slick and shining like old glass. He walked to his rusted Ford, the kind of truck that coughed more than it purred. Sergeant jumped into the passenger seat, his nails clacking softly against the worn upholstery. Noah sat behind the wheel, staring at the courthouse in the rearview mirror, the people leaving, their laughter spilling into the night. He could almost hear his old CO's voice. You volunteered again, Wyatt. You never learn. He turned the key. The engine stuttered, then caught. Guess we've got ourselves a mansion, Sergeant. The dog tilted his head as if questioning his sanity. Noah's smile was weary, but genuine. Yeah, I know it's stupid, but maybe stupid's all that's left. The truck rolled out of town headlights, cutting a narrow tunnel through the falling dusk. The highway wound upward toward Bear Ridge, where the last radio signal died, and only the wind had something to say. Noah drove in silence, one hand steady on the wheel, the other resting near the old unit patch sewn into his duffel. Every thread of it smelled faintly of diesel and sand. The memories came like static. The roar of rotors, the metallic scream of shells, men yelling for cover. His breathing hitched. Sergeant whined softly. It's all right, Noah whispered, grounding himself with the dog's fur. We're here now, just us. By the time they reached the outskirts of Pine Ridge, daylight had drained from the sky. The mountains loomed black against a bruised horizon, and frost glinted on roadside fences. At a gas station, the clerk looked up as Noah filled the tank. You the guy bought that stone house? Noah nodded. The man gave a low whistle. Nobody's lived there since the 70s. Folks say the last owner heard voices in the walls. Voices don't bother me. Maybe they should. The pump clicked. Noah climbed back into the truck, feeling every eye follow him as he pulled onto the dirt road leading into the foothills. The drive grew narrower, hemmed by pines heavy with snow. The moon cut through the clouds just enough to show the ridge line. The deeper they went, the quieter the world became. No birds, no engines, just the faint creak of the suspension and Sergeant's breathing. Hell of a welcome, Noah muttered. He touched the coin in his pocket, the $50. Its cool surface grounded him more than he cared to admit. Up ahead, the sign appeared half buried in frost. Bear Ridge Road Private. Noah downshifted the truck, groaning as the tires bit into the incline. In the distance, faint against the white slope, he saw it. The house, even in shadow, was massive. 2 stories of rough stone chimney, leaning porch, drooping like a tired jaw. The windows were black hollows staring out from the mountainside like empty eye sockets. The snow around it was untouched, save for a single trail of deer prints crossing the yard. He parked at the gate. The padlock on the chain was rusted through, snapped easily in his hands. As he pushed the gate open, it moaned like an old hinge giving up a secret. Sergeant stepped out first, sniffing the air. His body stiffened, tail raised, one paw hovering mid-step. Noah crouched beside him. "What is it?" The dog's ear twitched, but he didn't move. Only that low rumble built in his chest. Noah straightened, scanning the tree line. Nothing, just the silence pressing in. They walked to the porch together, boots and paws crunching in rhythm. The key slid into the lock with surprising ease, too smooth, like someone had oiled it recently. Noah pushed the door. It swung inward on quiet hinges. The smell hit first, dried dust, old smoke, and something metallic like rain on iron. The beam from his flashlight revealed furniture draped in gray sheets, a clock frozen at midnight, and wallpaper peeling like old bandages. "Home sweet home," Noah muttered. Sergeant moved ahead, his claws ticking on the wood floor, nose sweeping left to right. He circled once near the cold hearth, then lay down, eyes still watching the doorway. Noah dropped his duffel by the wall and sat on the crate. The house creaked around them, the sound deep and slow, as if exhaling after years of holding its breath. He rubbed his hands together. "We'll make it work. Just needs a little life." Sergeant blinked, unimpressed. Noah leaned back, staring at the ceiling, beams lost in shadow. Somewhere, wind whistled through a cracked window. And for the first time in months, despite the emptiness, he felt something close to peace. Or maybe it was exhaustion, dressed as peace. He pulled out the $50 coin, placed it on the dusty mantle. "For luck," he said. Sergeant yawned and settled closer, the warmth of his body against Noah's boot. A quiet reminder. Even in ruins, loyalty stayed. Outside, the snow started again, soft, endless, wrapping the house in a hush that felt almost holy. Morning came pale and reluctant. Light crept through the broken blinds in thin, dusty lines. Noah stirred on the floor where he'd slept, still half in his jacket, half in a dream that smelled of gunpowder and diesel. The fire he'd never lit had gone cold in his sleep. Sergeant was already awake, sitting by the door, one ear up. When Noah moved, the dog turned his head slowly, eye narrowing, as if to say, "You really slept through that." "What?" Noah muttered, rubbing his face. "We're not late for roll, Berthin." He reached for his canteen, took a drink that tasted faintly of metal. The silence pressed on his chest. Outside, no sound of engines, no birds, just that whisper of wind threading through pine needles. Noah stood, joints popping, and crossed to the window. The world beyond was frozen white. The road they'd come in on was already half buried. Beyond the ridge, fog rolled low, thick, like a slow-moving tide. "Welcome to paradise," he murmured. He fed Sergeant a handful of kibble and poured water into a bowl from a jug in the truck. The dog ate slowly, head down, as if still suspicious of the walls around them. Noah couldn't blame him. The house breathed strangely, settling noises that came from nowhere, faint groans that echoed under the floorboards. He decided to start with the basics. Find the breaker box, check the roof. Make sure the place wasn't about to collapse on them. The hall stretched narrow walls covered in faded wallpaper with blue vines curling upward. His flashlight beam caught a family photo. 3 people frozen in 1970s smiles. The glass was cracked across the father's face. Noah's breath fogged the glass as he whispered, "Guess you didn't make it either, huh?" He kept walking. Sergeant followed, close, nails tapping in rhythm. They explored room after room, a kitchen full of dust and mouse droppings, a dining room where a chandelier hung sideways, and a parlor with a piano that hadn't been touched in decades. In one corner, a stack of old newspapers lay under a broken chair. Noah crouched and picked one up. The headline read, Mayor Harrington announces Veteran Land Support Program, 1979. The name made him pause. Harrington, the same last name as the mayor he'd seen at the auction. He folded the paper, slipped it into his jacket. His pulse ticked faster for no reason he could name. Come on, Sergeant, he said. Let's see what's left upstairs. The stair groaned beneath their weight. Halfway up, Noah's boots sank into a soft step. The wood gave slightly, and dust puffed up like breath. Sergeant stopped head low, sniffing the air. At the landing, they found 3 doors. The first opened to a small guest room wallpaper peeled away in sheets. The second, a study desk, overturned drawers empty. The third wouldn't open at all. Noah turned the knob again. Locked. He crouched and tried peering through the keyhole. Nothing but darkness. Sergeant pressed his nose against the crack under the door and began to growl low. Noah's gut tightened. Hey, easy. The growl deepened. The hair along Sergeant's back bristled. Noah reached for the doorknob again, twisting harder this time. The old metal squealed and the latch gave way. The room was empty, just a mattress on the floor, mold-stained. A closet door cracked open an inch. Sergeant crept forward, nose twitching. Noah flicked the light switch. Nothing. He moved to the closet, hand brushing the wall for balance. His fingers caught on something carved into the plaster. Shallow lines, letters maybe. He lifted his flashlight. It was a word scratched unevenly, almost invisible under the paint stain. Noah exhaled. Well, that's reassuring. He turned to leave, but Sergeant didn't move. The dog stared at the closet, tail rigid. Noah opened the door slowly. The smell hit first. Cold, musty, like earth trapped too long. Inside, only an old coat hung from a nail. He brushed it aside, shining the beam lower. There, faintly visible through a thin crack in the floorboards, something metallic caught the light. He crouched and pried gently with his knife. A sliver of metal, a coin, rolled free. He picked it up. Another $50. 1943. He froze. The same year as the coin the clerk gave him yesterday. Sergeant sniffed it, then looked up at him, tail tucked slightly. Noah pocketed it, forcing a breath. Coincidence, just a weird one. But his mind didn't buy it. He spent the afternoon patching a window and sweeping the entryway. Sergeant stayed near the fireplace, head swiveling at every groan of the house. Each time Noah tried to talk aloud to fill the space with sound, it came out flat. Wrong. As dusk fell, he stood on the porch, watching fog thicken over the valley. The air tasted of pine and distance. Somewhere far below, the town's lights flickered like dying stars. He ran a thumb over the keyring in his pocket. Beside the house key hung the old dog tag he kept from his unit. The metal was worn smooth, the letters barely readable. It reminded him who he used to be, someone who knew how to read danger before it spoke. He looked back at the house. The upstairs window glowed faintly. He blinked. It couldn't be. There was no power. Sergeant, he said quietly. The dog was already standing, ears perked, body tense. The glow flickered, once, twice, then went out. Noah felt the weight of the mountain pressing in. All right, he muttered. We're not doing ghosts tonight. He went inside, checked every outlet, every wire. Nothing. He ended up back in the living room, sitting cross-legged beside Sergeant. The dog hadn't relaxed. His eyes tracked something only he could sense. Noah whispered, we'll get this place in shape. Few repairs, bit of paint, maybe even heat that works. Sergeant tilted his head, unimpressed. Noah chuckled softly, but his gaze drifted toward the dark hallway. Yeah, he said, one day. The wind outside rose whistling through the pines, making the window panes hum. The sound reminded him of rotor blades of the heat-blown deserts where he and Sergeant had once crawled through smoke together. The hum built until it almost sounded like voices layered under wind. Noah closed his eyes, gripping his knees. Not now. Not again. Sergeant moved closer, resting his head against Noah's arm. The steady warmth grounded him, dragging him back from the edge of the memory. After a long while, the sound faded and silence returned. Noah let out a slow breath. Guess we both got ghosts, huh? He reached into his pocket and pulled out the new coin, holding it beside the first one on the mantel. They were identical. Same year, same scratches. He placed them side by side. Sergeant lifted his head, watching. Noah whispered, 50 cents for peace, that's what they said. I'm starting to think it bought us something else. Outside, a branch cracked somewhere near the porch. Sergeant barked once, sharp and deep. Noah stood instantly, flashlight sweeping the windows. Nothing moved. The dog's growl didn't stop. Noah opened the door, cold air slapping his face. Snowflakes drifted under the porch light. He listened. Only the steady sigh of the wind. Then he noticed it. Footprints in the snow. Not his. Not fresh, but not old either. Boots leading away from the porch, disappearing into the trees. Noah's stomach tightened. He backed inside, locked the door, and sat down beside Sergeant. The dog stayed alert, eyes on the window. Tomorrow, Noah said softly, we figure out who else wants this house. He reached for the coin again, felt its cool edge in his palm, and for the first time that day, he didn't feel entirely alone. Just watched. The storm outside thickened, and the old stone house groaned again, as though it were alive enough to remember. That night, sleep never fully came. Noah drifted in and out of half dreams, half memories. He heard the hum of helicopters that weren't there, saw flashes of light through the cracks in the wall that dissolved into the snow's reflection. Each time, Sergeant stirred beside him, pressing closer, grounding him in the present. Near midnight, a sound cut through the wind, a slow, heavy creak from upstairs. Sergeant's head lifted, his one good eye fixed on the ceiling, body rigid, tail straight out. Noah sat up. Easy, boy. The creak came again, not the house settling, too deliberate. He reached for his flashlight, thumb trembling slightly on the switch. The beam swept across the room, nothing but dust and shadows. He slipped on his boots and took the pistol from his duffel, the same one that had followed him from deployment to deployment. It was unloaded, but the weight was comfort. The stairs were narrow, half-rotted, the kind that betrayed every footstep. Sergeant went first, muscles tight, ears, scanning every corner. The beam cut through dust that swirled like ash in the air. At the landing, the corridor stretched to the left, ending in darkness. To the right, that same locked door stood half open. Noah froze. He was sure he'd shut it. Sergeant stepped closer, growl low and guttural. Noah's breath fogged in the cold air as he whispered, "We've got company, huh?" He pushed the door slowly. It moved without a sound. Inside, moonlight spilled through a cracked window, painting silver streaks on the floorboards. The mattress still lay there. The wall still bore the word stay. But now something new. Boot prints, muddy, leading from the window to the door. Noah knelt, pressing his palm near them. Still damp. He swung the beam toward the window. The latch was broken, the snow blowing through a fresh gap. Someone had been inside. Sergeant moved to the sill, sniffing hard, then growled again. His tail lowered, his body trembling with restrained instinct. Noah checked the window frame. Wood splintered inward. Whoever it was hadn't come in. They'd left. "Guess we missed our visitor," he whispered. Downstairs, something banged, a dull thud, heavy like a door slamming. Noah whirled, flashlight shaking. They ran down together, boots and paws echoing. The living room stood unchanged. The front door was still bolted. Then came another noise, this time from behind the fireplace. A faint tapping, rhythmic, metallic. Sergeant's fur rose. He barked once, sharp and commanding. Noah crouched near the hearth, listening. The tapping stopped. He reached up and brushed his fingers along the brick. One stone was loose. He worked it free, the mortar brittle under his gloves. Behind it, a cavity, small, black, and cold. He reached in his hand, closed on paper. He pulled out a thin envelope, yellowed with age, sealed with wax that had half melted away. Across the front, faint writing blot. His stomach dropped. "Dad," he whispered. He broke the seal. Inside, folded pages written in a hand he recognized from old report cards and birthday letters. "If this reaches you, Noah, it means the truth outlived me. There are records in this house that were never meant to be found. Keep them safe. Don't trust Harrington." Noah's throat tightened. The letter trembled in his hand. He didn't hear the next sound. Sergeant did. The dog barked suddenly, spinning toward the window. A flash of light swept through the front yard, headlights moving slow along the road. Noah dropped to his knees, lights off, pulling Sergeant close. Through the crack in the curtain, he saw a truck idling by the mailbox. For a long minute, it just sat there, engine running. Then it backed up and disappeared down the ridge. Noah exhaled, pulse hammering. He looked back at the letter fingers shaking. What the hell were you mixed up in, Dad? Sergeant whined softly, nudging the envelope. Noah rubbed the dog's head. We'll figure it out together. The rest of the night passed in silence, broken only by the wind. When dawn came pale and cold, the world felt heavier. Noah brewed instant coffee on a camping stove, staring out the window. The footprints outside were already fading under new snow. He took the letter again, reading the last line over and over. Don't trust Harrington. That name followed him through the morning like a hum he couldn't silence. He remembered the old newspaper he'd found yesterday. Veteran Land Support Program, 1979. The mayor's father, maybe. Or the same man, older and meaner. He spread both items on the table. The letter, the paper, the 2 half-dollar coins. Sergeant sat by his chair, tail brushing the floor. Noah murmured, we need more light on this boy. So he did what Marines always did when information was scarce. He started recon. He drove into town, sergeant riding shotgun, head out the window, one ear flapping in the wind. The snow had stopped, leaving the streets bright and sharp. The diner was nearly empty, save for 2 older men and a waitress with tired eyes. The sign above the counter flickered. Noah took a seat at the corner booth. Sergeant lay beside him, quiet but alert. The waitress poured coffee without being asked. You the fellow who bought that old house? Noah nodded, her lips pressed thin. Place has a bad name around here. You will find out soon enough. What do you mean? She shrugged, eyes darting toward the old men. Ask anyone who's lived here long enough. People disappear up there. Some say the mountain eats them. Noah half smiled. I've seen worse things than a mountain. The men by the counter muttered. One said, you keep that mutt close. Ain't safe up there after dark. Noah ignored them, paid his tab, and left. But the feeling followed him, that subtle, unspoken knowledge shared by everyone else in Pine Ridge. At the grocery store, the clerk wouldn't meet his eyes. At the gas pump, an old man asked if he was kin to James Wyatt, then went quiet when Noah said yes. By the time he got back to Bear Ridge, the sun was already low. He parked the truck, looked at the house again. The fog had returned, coiling around the eaves like smoke. Inside, the air was colder than before, as if the house had drawn in the mountain's breath. Sergeant went straight to the fireplace, nose low. He pawed at the same spot where Noah had found the letter. Noah crouched beside him. What is it now? Sergeant's claws scraped again, a different section, this time just above the baseboard. The faint sound of hollow space behind the stone answered. Noah worked at the mortar with his knife until another loose brick gave way. Behind it, a small tin box. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Men in uniforms standing beside vehicles marked VRF Supply Convoy Division. His father in the center, smiling faintly. And beside him, Charles Harrington Younger, wearing the same VRF insignia patch. Noah's pulse thudded in his ears. He turned one photo over, scrawled in pencil, Gray Ford Land Case, 1979. VRF, he muttered. The words rolled off his tongue like a curse he'd forgotten he knew. His old unit had worked supply lines under a similar code once. Veteran Recovery Force. Sergeant's ears twitched at the name. Noah whispered, looks like we inherited more than a house. He stacked the photos back carefully, feeling the weight of ghosts pressed down on his chest. Outside, twilight deepened into that blue-gray that made the world feel suspended. The first wolf howl carried faint through the trees. Noah stood staring at the fireplace, the hidden bricks, the photos of his father. He thought of the letter's warning, don't trust Harrington. He turned off the flashlight, let the dark fill the room. Above, a floorboard creaked again. Slow, deliberate. Sergeant's growl built in his throat. Noah's voice was low. We're not alone in this house, are we, boy? The dog didn't move, didn't blink. Only that steady sound, half growl, half breath. The rhythm of a soldier and his partner, waiting for whatever comes through the door next. The minutes stretched, then turned back into silence. Noah waited until his heartbeat slowed, then whispered, all right, let's see what this place is hiding. He crouched near the hearth again, feeling along the cold stone. The mortar was uneven, different shades of gray, as if someone had patched parts of it in a hurry. Sergeant's nose followed his hand, sniffing every groove, and then he stopped at one section, pressing his paw against a brick that sounded slightly hollow when tapped. Noah frowned. Good nose. He fetched his pry bar from the truck, came back, and began to chip gently at the edge. Bits of brittle mortar flaked away. The sound echoed through the house like distant gunfire, sharp, deliberate. Every strike sent a ripple through his nerves, memories tugging at the corners of his mind. A faint metallic thud answered. Behind the brick, a thin seam appeared vertical, running along the wall's inner edge. Noah worked it free, brick by brick, until one piece shifted inward with a muffled click. A section of the wall opened like a door, narrow, concealed, leading into darkness. He froze, flashlight trembling slightly in his grip. "You seeing this, Sergeant?" The shepherd's ears tilted forward, but he didn't hesitate. He stepped toward the opening, sniffing the stale air that spilled out a dry, bitter smell, like paper that had been sealed too long. Noah followed, ducking through the narrow space. The beam of light slid across rough stone and wooden stairs, descending into shadow. "Basement," he muttered, but not on the blueprints. He took the first step. The wood creaked under his boots, dust swirling around his knees. The air grew colder with each step down. At the bottom, his light found the outline of a small room. Walls carved straight from rock floor, concrete ceiling low. He exhaled slowly. "Well, this ain't on Zillow." Along one wall, a desk stood covered in dust. Beside it, rows of metal filing cabinets. The labels on them had faded, but some still bore handwritten names. Grayford County, Harrington Development, Veteran Land Program. Noah's hands shook as he brushed the top of a drawer. It was locked, but the metal had rusted thin. He pried it open, hinges screeching. Inside, folders neatly arranged, untouched for decades. He pulled one out. The first page was a deed, a land transfer from 1979. The signature at the bottom made his chest tighten. James Wyatt, his father. He sat heavily on the edge of the desk, folder open in his lap. There were more signatures below, identical, each one stamped with the initials CH, Charles Harrington. Noah whispered, "You son of a..." Sergeant pressed close to his leg, whining softly. Noah flipped through the pages. The documents told a story, a trail of property transfers between veterans returning from the VRF Division's last deployment and a shell company run by the Harrington family. The veterans sold their land for pennies after being promised compensation that never came. It hit him all at once. His father's letters, the anger in his mother's eyes when anyone mentioned Pine Ridge, the way they'd moved every 2 years until she passed. His father had tried to stop this, and it had cost him everything. Noah rubbed his eyes, throat tight. "He didn't die in an accident, did he?" Sergeant whined again, laying his head on Noah's knee. On the desk under a stack of folders lay a small box. Inside, a photograph, 2 men in uniform standing beside a Jeep marked VRF Logistics Command. His father on the left, smiling faintly. Harrington on the right, hand on his shoulder. Behind them, the outline of the stone house. Noah traced the edge of the photo. "So you were partners once, and then you buried him." He heard movement faint from above. The sound of something brushing against the floorboards. Noah killed the flashlight. Darkness swallowed them. He listened. The creak came again. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Sergeant pressed close, silent now, but tense breathing, shallow. Noah whispered, "Someone's upstairs." He drew the pistol, moved toward the stairs. Each footstep a measured echo. The sound above shifted from footsteps to a dull scrape, then silence again. He reached the top, waited. Nothing. He pushed the hidden wall shut, leaving no trace. The living room looked exactly as he'd left it, the coins still on the mantel, the chair still facing the window. He stood there for a long time, scanning every shadow. The air felt different, colder, sharper, like the house had inhaled and was holding its breath. Finally, he spoke softly. "If you're going to haunt us, you'd better start paying rent." The joke fell flat in the empty room. He spent the next hours sorting through the documents he'd pulled out. Dozens of names, land deeds, and letters of complaint. Many bore military return addresses, all marked VRF Veterans Relief Fund. Every page ripe with betrayal. He found another letter unsigned but written in familiar cursive. "They're covering it up, James. The veterans, the funds, the land. They'll come for you next. If you've got a family, send them away." Noah set it down, staring at the ink until the words blurred. He remembered the way his father had left for a meeting one night and never returned. The local police had called it an accident. His mother never believed it. Now he knew why. A knock at the door jolted him. 3 taps, slow, even. Sergeant sprang up, barking low. Noah reached for his pistol, heart hammering. "Who's there?" Silence. He stepped closer, glancing through the peephole. No one. He cracked the door, peered out. Nothing but swirling snow. Then he saw it. An envelope wedged into the frame. He pulled it free, closed the door, and set it on the table. No name, just one word typed across the front. Stop. Inside was a single photo, the same one he'd just found in the basement. Only this version had a red X drawn over his father's face. Noah's stomach turned cold. He turned to Sergeant. They know. The dog's tail dropped, body low, eyes fixed on the window. Noah stuffed the photo into his pocket, checked the locks, and backed away. The house was quiet again, but not peaceful. The silence felt like a heartbeat waiting to restart. He sat by the fireplace, staring at the flames he'd finally managed to coax from the old wood. The letter from his father lay open beside him. "You tried to warn me," he whispered. "I just showed up 30 years too late." Sergeant lay down beside him, head on his boot, gaze steady toward the dark hallway. Noah placed his hand on the dog's shoulder, feeling the steady pulse beneath the fur. "Looks like we're in it now, partner." Outside, the storm thickened. The wind howled down the chimney, making the flames dance. The walls gave another groan, deep and low, as if answering him. The house breathed again, slow, heavy, alive. And Noah Wyatt understood for the first time that the house wasn't haunted by ghosts. It was haunted by truth. The next morning broke under a sky the color of pewter. The storm had passed, leaving the land washed in brittle sunlight. Ice clung to the porch rails like crystal vines. Noah stepped outside, coffee steaming in his hand, his breath mixing with it in the cold air. Sergeant followed, moving stiffly, on sore paws but alert nose, already tracking scents the snow had buried overnight. Noah's mind was still replaying the photo. The red X scrolled over his father's face. Whoever left it knew exactly what message they were sending. "We're watching." He tucked the letter from his father into his jacket, slid the pistol into his waistband, and patted Sergeant's head. "We're going to town, partner. Time to stir the hornet's nest." The drive down the ridge was quiet except for the crunch of frozen gravel and the creak of the truck's suspension. The forest thinned, giving way to the valley where Pine Ridge sat folded into itself like a secret it didn't want to share. Main Street looked half asleep. Old signs slanted porches, the post office, still bearing bullet holes from some forgotten decade. Noah parked outside the sheriff's office, which shared its building with the town's VRF memorial, a small bronze plaque listing names of local veterans. His father's wasn't there. Inside, the heat was turned too high, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee. A young deputy behind the counter looked up, his expression somewhere between curiosity and irritation. "Morning," Noah said. "I need to see Sheriff Riley." The deputy chewed his gum slowly. "He's not in." "When will he be back?" "Hard to say. Hunting trip, maybe." Noah tilted his head. "In January." The deputy's eyes flicked toward the door. "You could leave a message." Noah set his coffee down, voice calm but tight. "Tell him Noah Wyatt stopped by, James Wyatt's son." That got the reaction he expected. The gum froze mid-chew. "You're staying up at Bear Ridge?" "Yeah." The deputy's gaze shifted to the window, then back. "You might want to find a place closer to town." Noah smiled without warmth. "Appreciate the concern." When he left, he noticed a curtain twitch across the street. Someone watching from the bakery. It was a small-town habit, harmless on the surface, but it carried a deeper pulse. Outsider. Danger. Trouble. At the hardware store, the owner, Harris, according to his name tag, refused to take his money at first, pretending the register was broken. "System's down," he said, though Noah could see the screen glowing green. When Noah reached for the hammer and nails anyway, the man muttered, "You should have let that house rot." Noah ignored him. Sergeant waited by the door, tail still, eye following every movement. By noon, he had what he came for. Groceries, repair tools, and an ache in his chest that had nothing to do with the cold. The hostility of the town pressed on him heavier than the snow. On the way out, he stopped by the diner again. The same waitress, Maggie, according to her tag, was working. She gave him a nervous smile when he sat down. "Coffee, please." When she set the mug down, he asked, "You knew my father?" Her hands paused mid-wipe on the counter. "Everyone did." "Good man, hun. He worked with the VRF supply division, didn't he?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Where'd you hear that?" "Found his name in some old files. Looked like he was working with Harrington back in the day." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You want advice? Don't say that name too loud. Why not? Because folks here remember what happens to people who do. Noah studied her face. Behind the wrinkles of fatigue and cigarette smoke was something else. Fear carved deep. Maggie glanced toward the corner booth where two older maids sat whispering. Those veterans down there, they used to work the same contract your daddy did. Harrington promised land jobs retirement. Then the funds vanished, and so did half the men who asked questions. Noah's throat went dry. What about my father? Maggie hesitated. He was one of the last to stand up. He went up that ridge to meet Harrington himself. That was the night the storm rolled in. Same week his truck went off the bridge. Noah's hand tightened around the mug until the porcelain creaked. That wasn't an accident. I didn't say it was, she whispered. I just said that after that night, nobody talked about James Wyatt again. Sergeant whined softly under the table as if he could sense the tension winding tighter. Noah placed a few bills on the counter and stood. Thanks for the coffee. Maggie caught his sleeve. You're your father's son, aren't you? You won't let it rest. He met her gaze. Would you? Ooh, she let go. Then watch your back. As Noah stepped out into the afternoon light, he saw something glinting on the windshield of his truck, an envelope pinned under the wiper. He opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. You've been warned once. No signature. Sergeant growled, teeth flashing for a moment. Noah crumpled the note. They want me scared, boy. He looked toward the courthouse at the end of the street, its flag barely moving in the wind. I don't scare easy. Still, the weight of every glance followed him as he drove back up the mountain. The way conversation stopped when he passed. The way every window reflected his own truck. By the time he reached Bear Ridge, the sun had sunk behind the peaks. The world turned gray and gold, the snow glowing faintly in the dying light. Noah parked, climbed out, and stood for a moment listening. No wind, no birds, just silence. That felt wrong. Not peaceful, but held. Inside, the house was colder than he'd left it. The firewood pile had been disturbed. One log split in half as if someone had kicked it. Someone's been here again, he muttered. Sergeant sniffed along the floorboards, following a scent toward the back door. The latch had been unhooked from the inside. Noah's pulse picked up. He stepped out into the yard, flashlight cutting across the snow. Boot prints led around the side of the house and vanished near the tree line. He followed them until they disappeared under the pines, then stopped. The wind picked up just enough to make the branches whisper. Noah turned back toward the house and froze. A truck sat at the bottom of the road, engine idling, headlights off. He couldn't see the driver. He stood there for a long moment, both men waiting for the other to move. Then the truck backed away, slowly, tires crunching on gravel until the sound faded into nothing. Back inside, Noah leaned against the door, exhaling. They're not subtle. He poured whiskey into a tin cup, took a slow sip, and stared into the fire. Sergeant rested his head on Noah's knee. They knew Dad was trying to stop them. Noah rubbed the dog's ear absent-mindedly, and they've been cleaning up ever since. He reached for one of the VRF files from the basement, flipping it open. The handwriting inside was neat, mechanical, but cold. Transaction lists, property seizures, names some crossed out in red pencil. James Wyatt's name was the last one. Under it, a date, November 13th, 1979. Noah whispered, the day he died. Sergeant's ear twitched at the tone in his voice. Noah closed the folder. The pieces were aligning. His father's signature, Harrington's name, the erased veterans. The town wasn't indifferent. It was complicit. He looked around at the cracked walls, the creaking beams, the way the air moved through the house like breath in an old lung. They all looked away, Sergeant, he said quietly, all these years. Outside, another gust of wind passed over the ridge, carrying a sound that might have been thunder or the low rumble of a faraway truck. Either way, Noah knew the silence wouldn't last much longer. He stood, holstered his pistol, and looked down at Sergeant. Tomorrow we find someone who still remembers the truth. Sergeant pressed against his leg, warm and steady. The wind carried the faint sound of sirens down the valley, the sound of justice catching up. For the first time in years, Noah Wyatt allowed himself to believe in morning. The sound of boots crunching on the snow-hardened path startled Noah from his position at the window. Sergeant's ears shot up, his body stiffening into combat readiness before either of them could properly make out the figure approaching through the pre-dawn gloom. Noah reached for his pistol, muscles tense with memory. The silhouette materialized slowly, an older man with a weathered face and silver hair, moving with the careful deliberation of someone who'd spent decades navigating danger. Noah recognized the stance, military, probably law enforcement after. The stranger's right hand hovered near his hip, old habits dying hard. Noah raised the pistol. "That's far enough." The man stopped, breath clouding in the frigid air. His eyes sharp, despite their age, assessed Noah with practiced efficiency. "James Wyatt's boy. You look just like him." "Who's asking?" "Thomas Riley, former sheriff of Pine Ridge." His gaze shifted to Sergeant, a flicker of recognition crossing his features. "That's one hell of a dog you got there." Noah lowered the weapon slightly. "How'd you find us?" A humorless smile crossed Riley's face. "Son, I've been watching this house since you moved in. Question is, how'd you find those files in the basement?" The admission hung between them, rearranging everything Noah thought he knew about the past 3 days. He stepped aside, allowing Riley to enter while keeping Sergeant between them, an old combat habit that died harder than most. Inside, the fire had burned down to embers. Riley moved toward it with the familiarity of someone who'd been there before, kneeling to add another log with practiced hands. "Your father made me promise to keep an eye on this place. Said someday his son might come looking for answers. You knew my father was investigating Harrington. Knew it helped him." Riley pulled a flask from his jacket, took a quick pull. "James and I were gathering evidence against VRF. Land theft, embezzlement, fraud, the works. Your old man was methodical, kept everything documented. But you were the sheriff. Why didn't you arrest Harrington?" Riley's expression darkened. "You think I didn't try? Harrington owned the judges, the commissioners, half the state police. My own deputies were on his payroll." His voice dropped lower. "Then my oldest boy, Tommy, died in an accident after I pushed too hard." Message received. The implications sank into Noah's bones, colder than the mountain air. Riley wasn't just a witness, he was a survivor. "I promised your father I'd protect what he left behind. Been coming up here once a month for 30 years to make sure nobody found those records." Noah leaned against the mantel. "Then why didn't you destroy them? Would have been easier." Riley's face transformed, revealing something raw and unguarded. "Because my son Marcus came home from service broken. Lost everything to VRF schemes, his land, his savings, eventually himself." His voice cracked slightly. "Found him in the garage with the car running. After that, destroying evidence wasn't an option. Justice was all I had left." Sergeant moved closer to Riley, nosing his hand in a gesture that surprised both men. The old sheriff scratched behind the dog's ear. "Smart animal. Reminds me of your father's dog." "Rex," Riley's eyebrows rose. "How'd you know that name?" "Found his tags. My father left letters." "Then you know more than most." Riley pulled a folded paper from his pocket, spreading it on the table. "This is what they were really after. VRF was never about helping veterans." The paper revealed a geological survey map of Pine Ridge County with several areas marked in red. Property lines overlaid the topography, each parcel labeled with a veteran's name, including James Wyatt. Rare earth minerals, the kind used in electronics, military hardware. Back in '78, geological surveys found deposits all through these ridges. By '79, Harrington had set up a VRF as a front, offer returning vets assistance, get them to sign over mineral rights temporarily, then manufacture reasons to foreclose. Noah traced the boundaries of his father's property. And if anyone asked questions, they had accidents. 12 veterans signed a formal complaint. Within 18 months, all 12 were dead or disappeared. Riley's eyes met Noah's. Your father was number 12. Dawn had broken fully now, casting long shadows across the room. Noah studied the map, matching it against the documents he'd found in the basement. The scope of the operation, its ruthless efficiency, made his combat operations look amateurish. Why come forward now? Noah folded his arms. You've kept this secret 30 years. Riley pressed his lips together. Because 2 days ago, someone broke into my house looking for these files. After 30 years of silence, they're suddenly cleaning house. And you showing up? He shook his head. That's not coincidence. Noah considered the timing, the warnings, the intrusions. There's something happening they don't want exposed. Harrington Mining Corporation just filed for public offering. $3 billion valuation. Riley tapped the map, built on land stolen from dead men. Noah felt a familiar clarity descending, the same mental state that had gotten him through 3 tours. Problems reduced to objectives, threats, and assets. I need to find someone who'll listen. Local police won't help. There's one person who might. Eleanor Sullivan used to write for the Grayford Gazette before Harrington had her fired. She was working with your father back then, gathering testimony from veterans. Where do I find her? Cabin off Route 16 by Cooper's Creek. She's been waiting for someone like you for a long time. Riley stood, joints popping. Be careful who you talk to. Pine Ridge has long memories and short loyalties. After Riley left, Noah packed the essential documents and loaded Sargent into the truck. The animal seemed to understand the gravity of their mission, sitting at attention, eyes scanning the roadside as they descended into the valley. Eleanor Sullivan's cabin appeared smaller than Noah had imagined, a weathered cedar structure nestled among pines with smoke curling from a stone chimney. An ancient Volvo sat in the gravel drive, its bumper plastered with faded political stickers from campaigns long decided. When Noah knocked, he heard movement inside, the metallic sound of a shotgun being racked. State your business, a woman's voice called, strong, despite its age. Noah kept his hands visible. Thomas Riley sent me. I'm James Wyatt's son. The door opened to reveal a woman in her late 60s, silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, eyes sharp behind thick glasses. The shotgun remained half raised. You look like him. So I've been told. Her gaze shifted to Sargent. Something in her posture changed, a subtle softening. That dog military trained. Both of us are. She lowered the weapon. Then you better come in. Weather report says snow by afternoon. Inside, the cabin was cluttered but meticulously organized. Newspaper clippings covered one wall, connected by red string like a detective's murder board. Books stacked in precarious towers, and a vintage typewriter sat surrounded by yellow legal pads. Eleanor Sullivan moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd lived alone too long. She put on coffee without asking if he wanted any, then pulled a box from beneath a loose floorboard. I've been waiting 30 years for someone to come asking about James Wyatt. She placed a folder on the table. Your father was a good man, too good for Pine Ridge. You were investigating VRF together. Yes, I was gathering testimonials from veterans who'd lost land. She removed her glasses, rubbed the bridge of her nose. Your father was providing internal documents. Then suddenly, nothing. Car accident. Case closed before the coroner's report was filed. Noah opened the folder. Inside were affidavits from veterans, all telling similar stories. Land signed over temporarily for development, promises of improved properties and jobs. Then sudden fees, unexpected taxes, foreclosure notices. Your father found a pattern. Every property seized by a VRF had something valuable underneath: minerals, water rights, timber. He was compiling proof when he died. Why didn't you publish what you had? Eleanor's laugh was bitter, cutting. I tried. Editor killed the story. When I pushed, they fired me. Then my house burned down with all my notes inside. She touched a scar along her jawline. I barely got out. Message received. You think Harrington was behind it? Not directly. He has people for that, like Robert Hayes. His enforcer. Noah recognized the name from the files. Hayes signed most of the foreclosure documents. He's Harrington's shadow. Does the dirty work, keeps his hands clean. She pulled out a photograph, the same one Noah had found in the basement, with his father and Harrington standing before the stone house. They served together in war. Logistics division. Came back and built VRF from nothing. Sargent had moved to the window, muscles tense, watching the road with military focus. Noah felt a familiar prickle along his spine, the sensation that had saved his life more than once in combat. We're being watched. Eleanor didn't seem surprised. Been that way since you turned onto my road. Black SUV, tinted windows. Harrington's security detail. She sipped her coffee, unperturbed. They've been following me for decades. You get used to it. How have you survived this long? Insurance? She slid a key across the table. Safe deposit box at First National in Denver. Copies of everything, including a letter detailing who to blame if I meet with an accident. Every year I update it, let certain people know it exists. Noah pocketed the key. That might not be enough anymore. Riley says they're cleaning house. The IPO. Eleanor nodded. $3 billion can buy a lot of silence. She leaned forward. But we don't need silence. We need one person willing to listen. Who? Layla Winters, reporter at the Denver Chronicle. She's been looking into veteran land disputes across the state. Talented, tenacious, and not afraid of powerful men. Noah checked his watch. I need to get these documents somewhere safe first. Use the storm cellar out back. Concrete walls, steel door. Nobody's found it in 20 years. Outside, the promised snow had begun to fall, fine and persistent. Sergeant led the way to the cellar doors, nose working the air for threats. Noah transferred the documents, securing them in waterproof containers. When he returned to the cabin, Eleanor was on the phone, speaking in hushed tones. She hung up as he entered. Layla will meet you tomorrow. The diner in Fairfield, not Pine Ridge. Safer ground. That night, Noah slept in Eleanor's spare room pistol under his pillow. Sergeant stationed himself by the door, sleeping in 30-minute increments, then checking the perimeter, a habit from their deployment days that had saved their lives more than once. Morning arrived gray and oppressive. The black SUV remained at the end of the long driveway, its occupants invisible behind tinted glass. Eleanor packed him sandwiches and a thermos of coffee. Take the back road through Peterson's orchard. It connects to Highway 18 without passing the main road. As Noah loaded the truck, Eleanor pressed a flash drive into his hand. Everything I've gathered over 30 years, names, dates, property records, enough to start an investigation if it reaches the right hands. Why trust me with this? We just met. Eleanor's expression softened for the first time. Because I knew your mother. We served together in the Army Nursing Corps before she met your father. Sarah was my best friend. She touched his cheek briefly. You have her eyes, stubborn as hell, both of you. Noah navigated the narrow back road as instructed, Sergeant watching the side mirror for pursuit. The flash drive felt impossibly heavy in his pocket, weighted with decades of secrets and lost lives. The diner in Fairfield sat just off the interstate, a chrome-sided relic from the 1950s. Noah chose a booth with clear sight lines to all exits back to the wall, combat habits that had become second nature. Layla Winters arrived precisely on time, a woman in her early 30s with sharp eyes and a laptop bag slung over her shoulder. She spotted him, immediately assessing with a journalist's practiced gaze before sliding into the booth. You must be Wyatt. Her handshake was firm, no nonsense. Eleanor says you have documents about VRA. Noah studied her, looking for signs of deception. How do I know I can trust you? Layla didn't flinch. You don't, but I've spent 2 years investigating veteran land disputes across 3 states. Eleanor Sullivan is the only source who's consistently been right. She pulled out a notebook. So convince me. Noah placed the flash drive on the table. Everything's here. Land transfers, geological surveys, mineral rights. VRF was stealing property with valuable resources. That's a serious accusation against one of the state's most prominent businessmen. I have proof. 12 veterans filed complaints. All 12 died, banned, or disappeared within 18 months. Layla's expression remained neutral, but something shifted in her eyes. Including your father. Yes. She took a deep breath. What exactly do you want from this? Justice for my father, for all of them. Justice is a luxury, Mr. Wyatt. The best I can offer is truth. Then let's start there. They spent the next hour reviewing key documents. Layla asked precise, knowledgeable questions, taking meticulous notes. Occasionally, she'd stop to verify something on her laptop, cross-referencing with other cases. This matches patterns I've seen in Colorado Springs and Fort Collins, she finally said, closing her notebook. Same methodology, different companies, but always veterans as targets. You think it's wider than Pine Ridge? I think VRF might be just one branch of something much larger. She lowered her voice. There's a federal investigation brewing. Agent Cooper at the VA Inspector General's office has been building a case for years but lacks concrete evidence. Noah felt a surge of hope for the first time. These documents could provide that. Possibly. Let me make some calls, Layla stood. Meanwhile, stay mobile. Don't return to Pine Ridge until... The diner's front window exploded inward, showering them with glass. Noah reacted on instinct, pulling Layla down below the table as a second shot punched through the booth where her head had been moments before. Sniper, Noah hissed, years of training taking over. Stay down, move to the kitchen. They crawled through broken glass and panicked patrons. Sergeant had positioned himself by the rear exit. Hackles raised a low growl emanating from deep in his chest. The kitchen staff scattered as they burst through the swinging doors. Noah led them through the back into the employee parking lot. Where's your car? Blue Subaru front lot. Keys. She handed them over without question. Get to your car, drive to Denver. Don't stop for anything. What about you? We'll draw them off. Go. Noah whistled for Sergeant and they sprinted across the open parking lot toward his truck. A bullet pinged off the asphalt near his feet. The sniper had repositioned. Inside the truck, Noah gunned the engine fishtailing onto the highway. In the rearview mirror, he saw the black SUV pull out in pursuit, abandoning its surveillance of Layla. Good boy, he murmured to Sergeant, who sat rigid, scanning the road ahead. Now we need to disappear. Noah drove west, then north, taking increasingly remote roads. The SUV stayed with him, maintaining a consistent 3-car length professional surveillance, not trying to close the gap. The mountain roads narrowed as they climbed in elevation. Noah knew these tactics herding him toward an ambush point where the road would narrow further or dead end entirely. 10 miles from the Canadian border, he made his move. At a sharp curve with a steep embankment, Noah cut the wheel hard, sending the truck into a controlled slide through a gap in the trees. The truck bounced down a maintenance road barely wider than the vehicle itself. In the rearview mirror, he saw the SUV brake hard, unable to make the turn. By the time they backed up to follow, Noah had reached a fork in the logging road and veered left deeper into unmarked forest. 2 hours and several detours later, Noah pulled into an abandoned hunting cabin Riley had marked on his map. The windows were boarded, the doors secured with a rusty padlock that broke easily under pressure. Inside was Spartan, a wood stove, a single cot, shelves with dented cans of food long expired. Noah checked his phone, no signal as expected. They were effectively off the grid. Sergeant patrolled the perimeter while Noah constructed crude alarms, tin cans on fishing lines strung between trees, crushed glass scattered near obvious approach paths. Combat innovations repurposed for wilderness survival. As night fell, the temperature dropped precipitously. Noah lit the wood stove, rationing the meager supply of logs. Sergeant curled beside him on the narrow cot, body heat shared between comrades as they had done in mountain passes half a world away. We've been in worse spots, haven't we, boy? Noah rubbed the dog's ears, feeling the steady thump of his tail against the thin mattress. At least nobody's shooting at us. Yet. His mind raced through scenarios. Layla would either reach Denver safely or be intercepted. Eleanor and Riley might already be in danger. And somewhere in Pine Ridge, Harrington was eliminating loose ends from a 30-year-old crime that had claimed his father's life. Noah woke before dawn to Sergeant's alert posture. The dog stood at the window, ears forward, a low rumble building in his chest. Noah moved silently to the door, pistol ready. Outside, the forest was cemetery quiet. No birds, no wind, the unnatural silence that precedes human presence. The first tin can alarm triggered with a distant clatter. Someone approaching from the east, moving carefully but not silently enough. Noah slipped out the back, circling through the trees until he had a visual: 2 men in tactical gear, moving with the disciplined spacing of professionals. Private security, not law enforcement. One carried a rifle with scope, the other a handgun and what looked like zip ties. Not here for a conversation, then. Noah whistled, a short, sharp sound that sent Sergeant darting through the underbrush toward the cabin's far side. The diversion worked. Both men turned toward the sound, weapons raised. Moving silently through snow-damp leaves, Noah positioned himself behind the nearer man. A quick strike to the back of the neck dropped him without a sound. The second man turned too late, Sergeant already airborne, a mass of fur and disciplined fury hitting him squarely in the chest. The man's rifle discharged into the ground as he fell. Sergeant's jaws closed around his wrist, not breaking skin, but applying precise pressure that made the fingers release the weapon. Don't move. Noah pressed his pistol against the man's temple. Who sent you? The man's eyes darted between Noah and the snarling shepherd. Security detail, just following orders. Whose orders? Hayes, Robert Hayes. The name triggered something in Noah's memory, the documents, the enforcer. Harrington's shadow. What's the job? The man swallowed. Recover stolen documents. Bring in anyone found with them. Alive? a telling hesitation. That's what I thought. Noah zip-tied the man's hands with his own restraints. Your friend will wake up with a headache in about an hour. You'll both have plenty of time to reconsider your career choices. Back in the cabin, Noah gathered his meager belongings. They tracked him once. They'd do it again. Time to move. The truck started reluctantly in the cold. Noah guided it carefully back to the main road, constantly scanning for pursuit. Sergeant sat alert in the passenger seat, body tense with the anticipation of further conflict. Noah's mind raced through options, discarding each as too risky or uncertain. Eleanor's cabin was certainly watched. Riley might be compromised. The documents were secure for now, but without a way to get them to authorities, they were useless. His phone buzzed, a text message appearing as they crested a hill into cell range. Unknown number, Mason Creek Bridge, 1 hour, come alone. No signature, but Noah recognized the location at a remote crossing 20 miles south, seldom used since the new highway went in. Perfect for a meeting. Also perfect for an ambush. He checked his ammunition, considered his options, and made a decision. Looks like we're expected, Sergeant. Mason Creek Bridge was a single-lane wooden structure spanning a deep ravine. In summer, the creek below would be a pleasant burble. In winter, it was a 40-foot drop onto ice-crusted rocks. Noah parked a quarter-mile away, approaching on foot with Sergeant padding silently alongside. From the cover of pine trees, he surveyed the scene. A single vehicle was parked on the far side, Riley's old pickup truck. The former sheriff stood beside it, alone and unharmed from what Noah could see. Still, something felt wrong. Riley's posture was too rigid, his gaze fixed straight ahead rather than scanning his surroundings as his training would dictate. Stay, Noah whispered to Sergeant. The dog sank onto his haunches, watching intently as Noah emerged from the trees, pistol held low but ready. Riley, he called when he was 20 yards from the bridge. You okay? The old man's voice carried across the ravine, flat and emotionless. They took Eleanor. Last night. Hayes and his men. Noah froze. How'd you find me? Wasn't hard. You're predictable like your father. A new voice joined the conversation, smooth-cultured, emanating from the truck's open window. He means that as a compliment, Mr. Wyatt. James was nothing if not reliable. A man emerged from the passenger side, mid-60s, expensively dressed despite the rural setting. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed, his bearing aristocratic. Mayor Charles Harrington in the flesh, looking every inch the successful businessman rather than the architect of multiple murders. I'd hoped we might have a civilized conversation. Harrington stepped forward, hands open in a gesture of peace that didn't reach his cold eyes. About misunderstandings and how to resolve them. Where's Eleanor Sullivan? Safe for now. Her continued well-being depends entirely on our conversation. Harrington gestured toward the bridge. Shall we meet in the middle like diplomats? Noah weighed his options. Riley's eyes telegraphed a warning, but what choice did he have? No weapons. Agreed. Harrington made a show of opening his coat. Just talk. They met at the bridge's center, the ancient wood creaking beneath their feet. Up close, Harrington looked older, lines of stress etched around his mouth, despite his composed demeanor. I understand you have acquired some of my company's historical documents. You mean evidence of fraud and murder. Harrington sighed. Such dramatic language. VRF helped hundreds of veterans secure housing and employment after stealing their land and mineral rights. The program had administrative challenges, certainly, but characterizing standard business practices as criminal is simply uninformed. Noah felt his temper rising. 12 dead veterans isn't a challenge, it's a massacre. Something flickered across Harrington's face, not guilt, but annoyance at being contradicted. Those unfortunate incidents were investigated and closed decades ago. Reopening them now serves no purpose except to damage the reputation of a company that employs thousands, including the men who killed my father. Your father's death was ruled accidental. By your people. Harrington's mask of civility slipped slightly. What exactly do you want, Mr. Wyatt? Money, a position with the company? Name it. I want justice. Justice. Harrington chuckled, a sound entirely devoid of humor. A luxury concept for those who've never had to build anything of consequence. He straightened his cuffs. Your father had similar ideals. Impractical then, more so now. You knew him well. We served together, started VRF together, in fact. Something almost human crossed his features. James had vision, but no stomach for difficult decisions. Success requires sacrifice, Mr. Wyatt. Your father couldn't accept that. So you sacrificed him. Harrington's expression hardened. He sacrificed himself when he threatened everything we'd built. He left me no choice. The casual admission stunned Noah into momentary silence. Harrington had just confessed to orchestrating his father's murder, standing on a bridge in broad daylight, utterly confident in his impunity. Here's my offer. Harrington continued all business now. Return all documents in your possession. Sign a non-disclosure agreement. In exchange, you receive $5 million in Miss Sullivan's safe return. And if I refuse, then Eleanor Sullivan has an unfortunate accident, much like your father, and you shortly thereafter. Harrington checked his watch. You have until tomorrow noon to decide. Riley knows how to contact me. He turned to leave, then paused. Your father was a good man, Noah. Principled. But principles don't build empires or protect families. A final glance over his shoulder. Consider carefully which matters more to you, justice for the dead or safety for the living. As Harrington returned to the truck, Noah remained frozen on the bridge, rage and impotence battling within him. Riley approached slowly, his expression grim. He's serious. They've already killed once to keep this quiet. I know. So what now? Noah watched the truck disappear around a bend, his mind racing through scenarios and contingencies. We need to find Eleanor before the deadline. How Hayes could have her anywhere? Not anywhere. Noah pulled out his phone, brought up the geological survey map from Eleanor's flash drive. VRF owned dozens of properties around Pine Ridge. Most were sold off after the minerals were extracted, but there's one they kept an old mining office near Cooper's Creek. What makes you think she's there? Because it's isolated, secure, and has holding cells from when it was used as the company police station. Riley nodded slowly. It's heavily guarded. Hayes uses it as his base of operations. Then that's where we start. They returned to Noah's truck, where Sergeant greeted them with alert anticipation. As Noah outlined his plan, Riley's expression grew increasingly concerned. That's not a rescue mission, son. That's a suicide run. You got a better idea. Riley rubbed his jaw. Maybe. I still know people from my sheriff days. County SWAT commander owes me for keeping his son out of prison. He might loan us equipment off the books. We'd still be outnumbered. Quality over quantity. Riley managed a grim smile. And we have something they don't. Noah raised an eyebrow. What's that? Nothing left to lose. They spent the afternoon gathering intelligence. Riley called in favors from former deputies and local hunters who knew the terrain around the mining office. Noah studied satellite imagery, identifying approach routes and blind spots in the security perimeter. By nightfall, they had assembled a crude but comprehensive tactical plan and the equipment to execute it: body armor, communication devices, even thermal imaging scopes borrowed from a hunting supply store owned by one of Riley's former deputies. One more thing, Riley said as they prepared to move out. He handed Noah a small metal case. Inside was a syringe filled with amber liquid. What's this? Adrenaline shot, military grade, for your dog. Noah looked at him sharply. Sergeant doesn't need drugs to perform. It's not about performance. It's about survival. Riley met his gaze steadily. That shot gives him a fighting chance if things go sideways. Your father's dog didn't have that chance. The words hit Noah like physical blows. The implication that Rex had died trying to protect his father, that Sergeant might face the same fate, it crystallized everything at stake. They approached the mining office under cover of darkness, using the dense forest as concealment. The facility sat in a clearing, a main building with smaller outbuildings surrounded by chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Guards patrolled the perimeter with practiced precision. Noah counted 8 visible security personnel, all armed, moving with military discipline. This was no ordinary corporate security. These were mercenaries, hired guns with combat experience. Remember, Riley whispered as they prepared to split up. We're here for Eleanor, not revenge. Get her out, then we go to the authorities with everything. Noah nodded, though something dark and primal inside him longed for more than just rescue. The man who'd ordered his father's death was walking free, building empires on stolen land and buried bodies. They moved into position as midnight approached. Riley would create a diversion at the north fence, small explosives placed to draw guards away from the main building. Noah and Sargent would breach from the south, using the momentary confusion to locate Eleanor. The first explosion lit up the night like artificial lightning. Guards scrambled toward the disturbance, shouting commands into radios. Noah waited for the second blast, then cut through the fence with bolt cutters. "Find her, Sergeant," he whispered, releasing the dog. Sergeant moved with ghost-like efficiency, leading Noah toward a side entrance. The door was locked but yielded to a swift kick below the handle. Inside, emergency lights cast an eerie red glow over empty hallways. Sergeant paused, nose working the air, then turned decisively toward a stairwell. Down they went into the building's lower level. The air grew colder, damper, the smell of earth and old concrete permeating everything. At the bottom, a security door blocked their path. Noah examined its solid steel keycard access, probably alarmed. No subtlety would work here. He placed a small shaped charge on the electronic lock. Another gift from Riley's SWAT connection and ducked around the corner. The explosion was contained but effective, the door swinging open on damaged hinges. Beyond lay a corridor lined with holding cells, most empty, but the far one contained a huddled figure. Eleanor Sullivan sat on a metal cot, bruised but conscious, her eyes widening at their appearance. "About time," she rasped, as Noah unlocked her cell with keys taken from the wall. "I was starting to think I'd been forgotten. Can you walk? They didn't break anything important." She stood shakily. "Where's Hayes?" "Don't know. Focus on getting out first." They retraced their steps toward the stairwell, Eleanor leaning heavily on Noah's arm. They had almost reached the stairs when a voice echoed from above. "That's far enough, Wyatt." Robert Hayes stood at the top of the stairs, pistol leveled at them, with the casual confidence of someone who'd done this before. He was younger than Harrington, but cut from the same cloth, expensive suit, manicured appearance, cold eyes at odds with his polished exterior. "Harrington's deadline isn't until noon tomorrow," Noah said, buying time as he assessed options. The stairwell was narrow, offering little cover. Eleanor was in no condition to move quickly. Sargent had disappeared, either retreated or circling for a better position. Hayes descended 3 steps, keeping his weapon trained on them. "Plans changed when you decided to play hero instead of negotiator. Drop your weapon." Noah set his pistol on the ground, mind racing through combat scenarios. None ended well. "You're James Wyatt's boy, all right." Hayes smiled without warmth. He had the same problem, couldn't see the big picture. Kept pushing when he should have walked away. "Is that why you killed him?" "Business necessity, nothing personal." Hayes shrugged. "Same as this." The shot never came. Instead, a blur of fur and focused fury launched from a side corridor, slamming into Hayes with enough force to send him crashing against the wall. Sargent's jaws closed around his gun arm, the crack of breaking bone, audible even over Hayes' scream. Noah lunged up the stairs, retrieving his weapon and training it on Hayes, who lay crumpled and moaning, cradling his shattered arm. Sargent stood over him, hackles raised, a low, continuous growl rumbling from his chest. "Call off your dog," Hayes gasped, "like you called off your men when my father begged for his life." Something shifted in Hayes' eyes, fear giving way to a cold calculation. "You want answers, I've got them. About your father, about what really happened. But not here." Eleanor spoke from behind Noah, her voice steady despite her condition. "Don't trust him. He'll say anything now." "Smart woman." Hayes managed a pained smile. "But I'm your only link to what really happened that night. Kill me, and you'll never know." The temptation to end it here, to deliver justice with a single bullet, was almost overwhelming. But Noah needed answers more than vengeance. "Get up," he ordered, keeping his weapon trained on Hayes' chest. "You're coming with us." They emerged from the building to find chaos guards scrambling to contain fires at the northern fence. Alarms blaring, confusion reigning. Riley appeared from the shadows, expression shifting from relief to surprise at the sight of Hayes. "Change of plans," Noah explained tersely. "He's our insurance policy." They retreated through the fence breach, half dragging Hayes into the cover of trees. Sargent led the way, still alert for pursuers despite the night's exertion. "My truck's a quarter-mile east," Riley said. "We need to move fast before they regroup." Hayes stumbled between them, face pale with pain and blood loss. "You're making a mistake, Wyatt. Harrington has contingency plans for everything, including my capture." "Shut up and walk." They reached Riley's truck without incident, securing Hayes in the back seat with Eleanor keeping watch. As Noah prepared to follow, Riley pulled him aside. We need to split up. They'll be looking for a group. Where should we meet? Old Fire Watchtower on Black Ridge. It's been abandoned for years, but the access road is still passable. I'll take Hayes and Eleanor there. Noah nodded. I'll retrieve the documents and meet you by dawn. As Riley's truck disappeared into the night, Noah and Sargent began the long hike back to where they'd hidden their vehicle. The adrenaline of combat was fading, replaced by bone-deep exhaustion and the first creeping doubts. They had Eleanor, they had Hayes, but Harrington remained free, powerful, protected by layers of money and influence. And Noah had just declared open war on him by raiding his facility and kidnapping his right-hand man. The sun was breaking over the eastern ridge when Noah's truck bounced up the neglected fire road toward the watchtower. The ancient fire lookout stood sentinel on the highest point of Black Ridge Mountain, offering unobstructed views in all directions, perfect for spotting approaching threats. Riley greeted him at the base of the tower, shotgun cradled in his arms. Any problems? Clean getaway. You. Hayes needs medical attention, but he'll live. Riley's expression darkened. He's been talking, says he wants to make a deal. What kind of deal? Testimony against Harrington in exchange for immunity. Claims he can prove Harrington ordered your father's death personally. Noah felt his chest tighten. Can we trust him? About as far as I can throw him, but desperate men rarely lie well. Riley gestured toward the tower. Eleanor's with him now. She's surprisingly good at interrogation. Inside the watchtower, Hayes sat handcuffed to a metal chair, his broken arms splinted with first aid supplies. Eleanor stood nearby, arms crossed, expression unyielding. Hayes looked up as Noah entered. Wyatt, I was just telling Miss Sullivan about your father's last hours. His smile was strained, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. Fascinating story. I'm listening. Not without guarantees. I want immunity, witness protection, and a written agreement. Noah leaned close, voice dangerously quiet. How about this guarantee? Tell me everything and I don't throw you off this tower. Hayes's eyes widened slightly, recognizing the authenticity of the threat. Your father discovered financial irregularities in the VRF books. Traced them back to mineral extraction payments being diverted to offshore accounts. He confronted Harrington, directly threatened to go public. So Harrington had him killed. Not immediately. He tried reasoning with James, first offered him a partnership. Your father refused. Hayes winced as he shifted position. Harrington gave the order. I arranged the details to look like an accident. You pushed his truck off Sawyer's Bridge, after making sure he wouldn't survive the fall. Hayes met Noah's gaze without flinching. It was business, Wyatt, nothing personal. The casual brutality of the confession ignited something primal in Noah's chest, a rage so pure it momentarily blinded him. His hand moved to his weapon before he was conscious of the decision. Riley's voice cut through the fog. Noah, think about what James would want. The words penetrated the haze of fury. His father hadn't died for revenge. He died seeking justice. Noah lowered his hand. You'll testify to all of this under oath. With proper protections? Yes. Hayes relaxed marginally. Harrington's empire is built on bodies. I can provide names, dates, locations. Why turn on him now? Hayes laughed bitterly. Because he's already decided I'm expendable. The IPO means cleaning house, eliminating liabilities. I'm just getting ahead of the inevitable. Eleanor spoke for the first time since Noah entered. He's telling the truth about that, at least. Hayes was scheduled for retirement after the offering. Noah processed this new information, recalibrating their approach. We need to get Hayes to federal authorities, someone beyond Harrington's reach. Riley nodded. I made contact with Agent Cooper at the VA Inspector General's office. He'll meet us at the federal building in Denver tomorrow morning. Harrington will have the roads watched. That's why we're taking the old logging trails. 3-hour detour, but less likely to encounter his security teams. They loaded into Riley's truck at dusk, Hayes secured in the back with Eleanor keeping watch. Noah following in his vehicle with Sargent. The old logging road wound through dense forest, barely visible in places where nature had reclaimed the path. 2 hours into their journey, as they navigated a particularly treacherous section, Riley's truck suddenly braked. Noah pulled alongside, window down. Problem, Riley pointed ahead. Bridge is out. The narrow wooden bridge spanning a steep ravine had collapsed, its center section missing entirely. Recent damage based on the freshly splintered wood. This is the only route to the highway, Riley said grimly. Someone knew we'd come this way. The implications settled over them like a physical weight. Either they were being tracked or someone had betrayed their route. Noah scanned the surrounding forest, every sense heightened by the prickling awareness of danger. We need to turn back, find another way. Too late. Headlights appeared behind them, blocking the narrow road. More appeared ahead on the far side of the collapsed bridge. They were boxed in, nowhere to run. It's an ambush, Eleanor whispered unnecessarily. Riley's expression hardened into combat readiness. Everyone out. Use the trucks for cover. They scrambled for position as the approaching vehicles disgorged armed men, at least a dozen moving with military precision to establish firing positions. A familiar voice called from beyond the ravine. That's far enough, Mr. Wyatt. Charles Harrington stepped into the illumination of crossed headlights, immaculate even in the wilderness setting. You've had quite an adventure since our conversation on the bridge. Breaking into private property, kidnapping a corporate executive. Most impressive. Noah kept his weapon trained on the nearest mercenaries. How did you find us? Modern technology is remarkable. Harrington smiled thinly. Mr. Hayes has a subcutaneous tracking implant, standard procedure for executives with access to sensitive information. Hayes paled visibly. You knew I'd be taken. I considered it a possibility, hence the insurance policy. Harrington's attention returned to Noah. Now shall we conclude our business? The documents, Mr. Wyatt. All copies, in exchange for your lives. Noah calculated their odds outnumbered, outgunned, trapped between Harrington's forces in a 100-foot drop. Even if they somehow survived the initial exchange, they'd never make it to Denver with Hayes. Riley moved closer, voice barely audible. There's another way. The old mine shaft half-mile back connects to tunnels under Cooper's Creek. We could. The shot came without warning, a single crack that echoed through the ravine. Riley staggered, blood blooming across his chest, expression frozen in surprise. No, Noah caught him as he collapsed, lowering him to the ground. Harrington's voice remained calm, almost regretful. I dislike demonstrations, but time is short. The documents, Mr. Wyatt. Final offer. Riley clutched Noah's arm, blood bubbling from his lips. The flash drive. Inner pocket. Noah found it a small metal USB drive, unremarkable except for the weight of lives it represented. Riley's fingers closed around his wrist. Your father would be proud, he whispered. Then his eyes fixed on something beyond Noah, beyond the ravine, and the armed men, and the 30 years of buried secrets. His hand fell away. Something broke inside Noah, a dam holding back rage and grief and the accumulated weight of injustice. He looked up at Harrington standing untouchable across the ravine and made his decision. You want the documents? He held up the flash drive. Come and get them. Without warning, he flung the drive into the ravine. It arced through the darkness, catching moonlight for an instant before disappearing into the shadows below. Harrington's composure finally cracked. You fool, do you realize what you've done? Ended your leverage. Noah stood hands empty, facing the man who'd orchestrated his father's death. Now it's just us. For the first time, uncertainty crossed Harrington's features, a flicker of recognition that the situation had changed fundamentally. This was no longer a negotiation over evidence, but a confrontation between enemies with nothing left to lose. He signaled to his men, kill them. All of them. The night erupted in gunfire. The world exploded into chaos. Noah dove behind Riley's truck as bullets pinged off metal, shattering glasses, and puncturing the engine block. Sergeant pressed close to his side, hackles raised, a low growl vibrating through his body. Eleanor and Hayes had taken cover behind the other vehicle, her arm around the wounded man's shoulders as she dragged him to safety. Stay down. Noah shouted over the gunfire, checking his weapon. 6 rounds against a small army of mercenaries. The math wasn't encouraging. Sergeant's ears pricked suddenly. He turned toward the ravine body, tensing with recognition. Noah followed his gaze, but saw only darkness beyond the collapsed bridge. Then movement caught his eye, shadows detaching from shadows, figures advancing silently through the trees on the far side. The mercenaries noticed too late. The first went down without a sound, pulled backward into the underbrush. Another spun, firing blindly into the forest before collapsing with a soft grunt. Confusion spread through Harrington's forces. Check the perimeter, someone shouted, and flashlight beams cut frantic arcs through the night. A figure materialized beside Noah, moving with the predatory silence of a combat veteran. Heard you could use some backup. The voice belonged to a woman in her 30s wearing tactical gear with no insignia. Who are you? Layla Winters sent us. I'm Agent Cooper, VA Inspector General's office. She nodded toward the ongoing skirmish. My team's creating a diversion. We need to move now. Riley's dead. I know, I'm sorry. Her eyes held genuine regret. But we need Hayes alive if we're going to bring down Harrington. Noah glanced at Eleanor, who nodded grimly. They had come too far to turn back now. There's an extraction point half a mile east, Cooper continued. Follow me. Stay low. They moved through the underbrush, half-dragging Hayes between them. The sounds of fighting receded behind them. Sergeant took point, his military training evident in every controlled movement. The extraction point turned out to be a clearing just large enough for a helicopter, its rotors already spinning as they approached. Cooper's team materialized from the trees, one by one covering their retreat. Wait. Noah paused at the helicopter door. The flash drive with the evidence, I threw it into the ravine. Cooper smiled thinly. Layla gave us copies yesterday. Smart woman backing everything up. Relief washed through him, followed immediately by guilt. Riley had died believing their last hope was gone, flung into darkness by Noah's impulsive gesture. The helicopter lifted off, banking sharply to avoid the ridgeline. Through the window, Noah caught a final glimpse of the ambush site. Floodlights illuminated the scene, figures moving frantically around the disabled vehicles. Standing apart, unmistakable even at this distance, was Harrington coat flapping in the rotor wash, face upturned toward their escape, a study in cold fury. 2 hours later, they touched down on a hospital helipad in Denver. Medical personnel rushed Hayes into surgery, while federal agents secured the perimeter. Noah found himself in a sterile conference room, sergeant at his feet, as Cooper debriefed him on the operation. We've been building a case against VRF for years, she explained, spreading files across the table. Veterans from a dozen states reporting the same pattern: land seized through fraudulent means, always containing valuable resources. But you never had enough proof. Until now, Cooper opened her laptop, revealing Eleanor's flash drive. Hayes' testimony, combined with these documents, gives us enough for a federal warrant. Harrington's being picked up as we speak. Noah should have felt triumph, or at least satisfaction. Instead, an odd emptiness spread through him. The adrenaline that had carried him through the past days was ebbing, leaving only exhaustion and the hollow recognition that justice wouldn't restore what had been taken. What happens now? Protection for you and Ms. Sullivan until trial. Hayes gets a reduced sentence in exchange for cooperation. And Harrington faces charges for fraud, conspiracy, and multiple counts of murder. Eleanor appeared in the doorway, looking decades older than when they'd met. The bruises on her face had darkened to purple, but her eyes burned with the same fierce intelligence. They found Riley's body, she said quietly. Harrington's men took it. Noah closed his eyes, another piece of collateral damage in his quest for truth. First his father, now Riley. The cost was mounting with every step. Cooper's phone buzzed. She checked the message, her expression shifting subtly. We have a problem. Harrington wasn't at his residence or his office. He's running, Eleanor concluded. Not yet. According to our surveillance, he's headed to VRF headquarters. Seems to be initiating some kind of emergency protocol. Noah stood suddenly alert. He's destroying evidence. We have teams en route, but he's got at least a 30-minute head start. I know that building. Noah's mind raced through floor plans from the documents. There's a secure room in the sub-basement, fireproof vault where they kept the original deeds. Cooper's eyes narrowed. How quickly can you get us in? 3 black SUVs screamed through the night, lights flashing but sirens silent. Noah sat in the lead vehicle, studying satellite imagery of the VRF headquarters with Cooper. Sergeant rested his head on Noah's knee, sensing the tension building around him. The VRF building rose from the Pine Ridge skyline like a monument to corporate success, 12 stories of glass and steel, illuminated against the night. Security vehicles clustered around the main entrance, but the loading dock at the rear appeared unguarded. Harrington entered 20 minutes ago, Cooper confirmed as they approached. Building security shows minimal staff, present weekend skeleton crew. They parked a block away, approaching on foot through service alleys. Cooper's team moved with disciplined precision, covering angles and securing their advance. Noah felt the familiar rhythm of an operation settling into his bones, the heightened awareness, The controlled breathing, the laser focus on the objective. The loading dock door yielded to Cooper's federal override codes. Inside the building hummed with the artificial life of climate control and security systems. Their footsteps echoed on marble floors as they crossed the deserted lobby toward the executive elevator banks. Sub-basement access requires biometric scanning, Noah warned, recalling blueprints from Eleanor's files. Retinal or fingerprint. Cooper produced a small device. Federal master key. Overrides any civilian security system. The elevator descended smoothly, opening onto a corridor lined with reinforced doors. Each bore a numbered keypad and biometric scanner. At the end, a final door heavier than the others, with additional security measures. Cooper's team positioned themselves at intervals covering potential escape routes. Noah and Sergeant advanced toward the vault, following the sound that had caught the dog's attention, paper shredders working at maximum capacity. Through a small window in the door, they could see him. Charles Harrington stood amid piles of documents, feeding folders into an industrial shredder with methodical precision. A second machine nearby was incinerating material already processed, reducing decades of evidence to ash. Noah met Cooper's eyes, receiving a nod of confirmation. Together, they breached the door, weapons raised. Harrington didn't even look up. Mr. Wyatt, I was wondering when you'd arrive." His hands continued their work, dropping another file into the shredder's maw. "You're too late, I'm afraid. The most incriminating documents are already gone." Federal agents step away from the shredder. Cooper's voice rang with authority. Yes, due process and all that." Harrington finally turned, wiping shredded paper from his immaculate suit. "I'm sure my attorneys will sort this out by morning." The casual confidence, the absolute certainty of immunity, it struck Noah like a physical blow. Even now, surrounded by federal agents with Hayes in custody and evidence in hand, Harrington behaved like a man merely inconvenienced, not cornered. "You're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and the murders of James Wyatt and 12 other veterans," Cooper stated, producing handcuffs. "Alleged murders, Agent Cooper. Alleged." Harrington extended his wrist with theatrical compliance. "And good luck proving any of it without Hayes' testimony. My understanding is that he suffered complications during surgery. Touch and go, according to my sources at the hospital." Cooper's expression remained neutral, but Noah caught the flicker of concern in her eyes. Without Hayes, their case weakened significantly. "We have the documents," Noah said, gesturing to the material they'd salvaged. "Fragments, context-free fragments that my legal team will dismantle in hours." Harrington's smile was cold, calculating. "This isn't my first investigation, Mr. Wyatt. Why do you think I've thrived for 30 years, while smarter, more cautious men fell by the wayside?" As agents led Harrington away, Noah felt the victory turning to ash in his mouth. The man responsible for his father's death, for so much suffering, was already plotting his escape through the labyrinth of legal loopholes and corporate protection. "He's right about Hayes," Cooper admitted when they were alone. "Hospital just reported he's in critical condition. Pulmonary embolism during surgery. They're not optimistic." So Harrington walks, again. "Not if we find something definitive in what's left of these files. Something that doesn't require Hayes' testimony to authenticate." They worked through the night, sorting through partially destroyed records, cross-referencing them against Eleanor's digital copies. By morning, exhaustion had settled into Noah's bones like lead. Sergeant dozed beside him, occasionally stirring to offer companionship through nudges and watchful eyes. Cooper entered the conference room they'd commandeered, face grim. "Hayes died an hour ago, officially listed as surgical complications. And unofficially, tox screens showed traces of a compound that wouldn't appear on standard hospital tests. Someone got to him." She slammed her fist against the table. "Harrington's already filing for immediate release, claiming unlawful detention without evidence." Noah stared at the scattered papers, the half-assembled puzzle of his father's murder and the subsequent cover-up. So close, yet still incomplete. "We need something definitive, something Harrington can't explain away." Cooper nodded slowly. "There might be one option left." Hayes mentioned a recording system in Harrington's office, paranoia measure, he claimed. Every conversation for the past 15 years stored in an off-site server farm. "Can you access it?" "Not without a specific warrant, which requires probable cause we no longer have without Hayes." She hesitated. "But you're a private citizen. Different rules apply." The implication hung in the air between them. Cooper couldn't legally obtain the recordings, but she also couldn't stop Noah from pursuing them independently. "I'll need an address." She slid a notepad across the table. "I'm stepping out for coffee. Be gone 20 minutes. Whatever happens in that time is outside my knowledge or control." The server farm occupied a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of Pine Ridge. No signage, minimal security, its anonymity, its best protection. Noah approached cautiously, sergeant alert beside him, scanning for surveillance or guards. The loading dock door featured a keypad lock, standard commercial model, nothing sophisticated. Noah retrieved the small electronic device Cooper had accidentally left behind when she went for coffee, attaching it to the keypad. Seconds later, the lock disengaged with a soft click. Inside, rows of server racks hummed with the digital heartbeat of stored secrets. A central workstation provided access to the system. Noah inserted the flash drive Cooper had definitely not given him, uploading the program that would locate and extract Harrington's recordings. The search parameters were specific conversations from November 1979, focused on James Wyatt. The system churned through terabytes of data, finally isolating 17 audio files from the target period. Noah downloaded them all, heart-pounding, with the awareness that he held 30-year-old conversations in his hand, possibly the last words his father had spoken. He was nearly at the exit when the first alarm triggered. Red lights bathed the server room as a computerized voice announced a security breach. Noah ran, Sergeant loping beside him as the sound of approaching vehicles filled the air. They escaped through the maintenance tunnel, emerging 2 blocks away, just as security forces surrounded the building. Within the hour, they were back at the federal building, the flash drive secure in Cooper's possession, obtained through means she carefully avoided documenting. The recordings were degraded, full of static and gaps, but clear enough. Harrington's voice, younger but unmistakable, filled the conference room. "Wyatt's becoming a problem. He's gathered testimonials from 7 veterans, already claims he has proof of mineral rights manipulation." Another voice, Hayes presumably, "How do you want to handle it?" "The usual way wasn't effective. He's not intimidated by threats. So we moved to plan B." A pause. "Yes, make it look accidental. The bridge on County, Route 7 brake lines, perhaps. Something clean. And if he's got copies of the documents elsewhere, find them. His house, his office, that cabin he uses. Leave nothing." The recording continued, detailing the planned murder with the clinical detachment of men discussing a business transaction. Noah listened, knuckles white, as he gripped the edge of the table, hearing his father's death being orchestrated in calm, measured tones. Cooper stopped the playback. "This is enough. Conspiracy to commit murder, explicitly ordered. No legal ambiguity. He'll claim the recordings are fake. Audio forensics will authenticate them. This, combined with the partial documentation and Eleanor's testimony, gives us a solid case." She gathered the files. "I'm requesting an emergency hearing to prevent Harrington's release. With this evidence, no judge will let him walk." Sitting alone afterward, Noah should have felt vindicated. The man who murdered his father would face justice. The truth would finally emerge. Yet the victory felt hollow, incomplete. Riley was still dead. His father was still gone. 30 years of lives damaged by Harrington's greed couldn't be restored through a prison sentence. Sergeant nudged his hand, the simple gesture grounding him in the present. The dog's loyalty, unwavering, uncomplicated, offered perspective when nothing else could. Eleanor found him there, staring at his father's photograph. "Cooper says they're holding Harrington for arraignment tomorrow. No bail likely." "Good." She studied him with eyes that had seen too much. "It doesn't feel like enough, does it?" "No, it never does." She sat across from him. "Your father knew that. He told me once that justice isn't about feeling better, it's about making sure the story gets told right." 3 days later, Charles Harrington appeared for arraignment in federal court. The media circus transformed the stately building into a battlefield of cameras and reporters. Noah watched from the gallery as the man who had built an empire on stolen land and buried bodies stood before the judge, still radiating the confidence of someone who expected the system to bend to his will. The charges were read aloud: conspiracy, fraud, murder. Harrington entered his plea not guilty with the practiced ease of the perpetually innocent. Outside afterward, Noah found himself surrounded by reporters, their questions overlapping in a cacophony of curiosity. He pushed through them, seeking the solitude of his hotel room, when a hand touched his arm. Layla Winter stood there, recorder in hand, expression professional but eyes compassionate. "Mr. Wyatt?" A moment, he almost refused, then remembered she had been the catalyst. Her involvement had brought Cooper saved their lives, preserved the evidence. One question: was it worth it? All of this, the danger, the losses, to expose what happened to your father. The question struck deeper than she could know. Worth Riley's life, worth the nightmares that would surely follow, worth the knowledge that justice, even when served, came too late for those who needed it most. Noah looked past her to where Sargent waited patiently by a tree alert and loyal despite the chaos around them. The truth doesn't ask if it's worth finding. It just waits to be found. Layla nodded, understanding something fundamental in his response. Your father would be proud. The words echoed Riley's final statement, forming a bridge between past and present that tightened Noah's throat. That night, Noah returned to Bear Ridge for the first time since the ambush. The stone house stood as he had left it, cold and empty, yet somehow lighter now that its secrets had been exposed to daylight. He built a fire in the hearth where it had all begun, where his father had hidden the first clues to a conspiracy that had claimed his life. Sargent settled beside him, head on paws, watching the flames with ancient, knowing eyes. In the morning, Noah began the work of cleaning, repairing, rebuilding. Each broken window replaced each damaged floorboard, removed each wall, repainted, small acts of reclamation that slowly transformed the house from mausoleum to home. Weeks passed. Spring arrived on the ridge, melting snow revealing the bones of the land beneath. The federal case against Harrington proceeded through preliminary hearings, each new disclosure reinforcing the mountain of evidence against him. Noah testified when required, then returned to the solitude of Bear Ridge, finding more healing in physical labor than in courtroom vindication. Eleanor visited occasionally, bringing news from town and supplies that Noah found difficult to acquire, given his new notoriety in Pine Ridge. Cooper called with updates on the case, each conversation brief but meaningful. One evening, as Noah sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the valley in amber and gold, a vehicle approached on the long drive. He recognized Layla's blue Subaru, now dust-covered, from the unpaved road. She climbed out, notebook in hand, professional as always, despite the informal setting. "Hope I'm not intruding. You drove 3 hours to get here. Must be important." "The story runs tomorrow. Front page Sunday edition." She handed him a preview copy. "I wanted you to see it first." The headline read, "Veteran Land Scandal Exposed 30-Year Conspiracy Claims 13 Lives." Below it, a photograph of James Wyatt in his military uniform, eyes clear and determined, looking directly into the camera as if challenging the future to remember him. Noah's fingers traced the image. "Where did you find this?" "Eleanor had it. Said your mother gave it to her for safekeeping." The article detailed everything: the land seizures, the mineral rights, the murders disguised as accidents. It named names, cited documents, quoted testimonials from surviving veterans who had lost their land to VRF's machinations. "It's a good piece," Noah said, finally handing it back. "Thorough. But it's not enough." Layla's perceptiveness was unsettling. "Nothing ever is when it's personal." "No." Noah looked out over the valley, the town lights just beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. "But it's the truth. That matters. What will you do now? After the trial?" The question caught him off guard. He had been so focused on uncovering the past that he'd given little thought to his future. The house repairs had been automatic, therapeutic, rather than purposeful. Sargent patted over from where he'd been exploring the newly replanted garden, settling against Noah's leg with the comfortable familiarity of a partnership forged in both war and peace. "This land was meant to help veterans once," Noah said slowly, the idea forming as he spoke. "Maybe it still can." 6 months later, as summer yielded to autumn, Charles Harrington was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of James Wyatt and conspiracy in the deaths of 12 other veterans. The courtroom was packed with families of the victims, reporters, and curious onlookers. Noah sat in the back watching justice delivered with a solemnity that transcended vindication. Afterward, he drove directly back to Bear Ridge, where transformation had taken root. The stone house stood renewed, its windows gleaming in the afternoon sun. Around it, 5 new cabins had been constructed, arranged in a semicircle facing the valley. A modest sign at the entrance read, "Wyatt Haven, Healing Grounds for Veterans and Service Dogs." The first residents had arrived 2 weeks earlier. 3 veterans with PTSD and their service animals seeking the peace that only mountains and purpose could provide. Noah had designed the program with input from VA psychologists, physical labor animal care, nature immersion, and community support. Eleanor had become a permanent fixture, her nursing background proving invaluable as they established routines and protocols. Cooper visited monthly, bringing resources and connections to federal veteran programs. That evening, as the residents gathered for dinner in the main house, Noah found himself at the head of the table, surrogate family, forming around shared experiences and mutual understanding. Sargent moved among them, the elder statesman of the service dogs, somehow communicating his wisdom to the younger animals through subtle gestures and watchful guidance. After dinner, Noah walked to the ridge overlook alone. The valley sprawled below Pine Ridge, transformed by investigation and revelation. The corrupt power structure had collapsed when Harrington fell. New leadership, younger and untainted by the past, was slowly rebuilding the town's reputation. The sound of footsteps behind him announced Eleanor's approach. She stood beside him, gazing at the vista in companionable silence before speaking. "The new veteran arrives tomorrow. Marine like you, lost his leg in his third tour. We'll be ready." "I know." She hesitated. "There's something else." Layla called. "They're nominating her series on VRF for a Pulitzer. She wants to interview you again, get your perspective on what's happened since the trial." Noah considered the request. His instinct was refusal. He had said all he needed to say about Harrington, about his father, about the conspiracy that had claimed so many lives. Yet something tugged at him, a recognition that stories unfinished left wounds unhealed. "Tell her yes." Eleanor smiled, a rare softening of her practical exterior. "James would approve of what you've done here, taking something broken and making it serve a purpose again." That night, Noah stood in what had once been his father's study, now repurposed as an office for Wyatt Haven's operations. On the wall hung photographs: James in uniform, Riley in his sheriff's gear, the veterans who had signed the original complaint against VRF, each face a testament to courage that had ultimately prevailed, though too late for those pictured. Beside them hung newer images. The first residents of Wyatt Haven, their service dogs, the cabins under construction. Life continuing, purpose renewed. On the mantel sat the two half-dollar coins that had started everything, one given by the court clerk, one found in the hidden compartment. Noah had them mounted in a small frame, a reminder that sometimes the smallest things could trigger avalanches of truth. Sargent entered, his movements slower now, but no less dignified. The dog had aged visibly during their ordeal, as if the stress of the past months had accelerated time's effect on his body. Yet his eyes remained clear, his loyalty unwavering. Noah knelt beside him, hand running through fur that now showed more gray than tan. "We did it, boy. We found the truth." Sargent leaned against him, solid and warm, the press of his body communicating everything words couldn't: companionship, understanding, the simple comfort of presence amid loss and redemption. Outside, the wind swept down from the mountain peaks, carrying the scent of pine and approaching winter. Inside Wyatt Haven, damaged souls began the slow process of healing, guided by a man who had walked through fire to build something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal. The house that had once held secrets now offered sanctuary. The land that had been stolen now provided refuge. The son who had sought justice now extended mercy, not forgetting the past, but refusing to be defined by it. In the morning, Noah would welcome another broken warrior to Wyatt Haven, offering not promises of complete restoration, but the possibility of purpose beyond pain. For now he sat with his oldest friend, watching night claim the valley as peace slowly, tentatively claimed him. The 50-cent piece that had bought a mansion had purchased something far more valuable in the end, not just truth or justice, but the chance to transform tragedy into healing. Some debts could never be repaid, some losses never recovered. But in the space between what was lost and what remained, Noah Wyatt had found something worth building. Not an ending, but a beginning, purchased with grief, cemented with truth, sustained by the recognition that even the deepest wounds could become foundations for structures yet to be imagined. Sargent sighed deeply, settling his head on Noah's knee as darkness embraced the mountain. Together they sat sentinel and guardian, watching over what they had created from ruins, a haven built on hallowed ground, where 50 cents had bought not just a house, but a home for lost souls seeking their way back to the light.